We're the Martins. My name is Seth. This is my wife Anna, and we attend the Hannibal Crossing.
We got married very young, and we had a baby very young, right out of high school.
It was a trying time. Money was tight. We didn't have a lot of extra wiggle room in our budget. I was working full-time as a manager at a grocery store, making good money for what I was doing, but not any extra kind of income. And
On top of that, we were both college students with a newborn baby as newlyweds.
had money for food and rent, not a whole lot else, but every week we made sure that we had money for tithe and tithe 10% faithfully, even though that the amount of money that we were bringing home was very, very small, that cut was still something that we made sure was every single time that we got money.
Looking back on our situation, financially it doesn't make much sense because we had needs that we didn't even know what our needs were. We had a newborn baby, and I remember right before our son was born, we had a family member show up to our apartment with just a van load of baby stuff that they were hand-me-downs and stuff that she had, and she gave us tons of clothes and just a bunch of baby stuff. And we didn't even know that we were going to need it, and it was just a huge blessing. And God was taking care of our needs when we didn't even know what our needs were. From our first paycheck as a married couple, and even before we got married, we always tithed.
We were both brought up in a Christian home, and I was given an allowance as a child and was expected to tithe on that, and it's just something we were both brought up in the church. It was an expectation that you give your first 10% to God, and you work on the rest of that 90%, and it's never led us astray. It's blessed us greatly. We've flourished.
We have seen the blessings pour out from tithing. It was a chance for us to share our story with our small group and just kind of encourage other people that we knew to tithe, and that it does work. God will bless you when you tithe. We were in a position where we didn't have very much income, so it would have been a very easy excuse for us to say we really need all of our income to provide for our needs and to not trust God, but we didn't do that. We did trust Him. You know, we were newlyweds with a newborn baby. Both of us were college students, and we came out of that completely debt-free while we were tithing, and we were living off of one income from a grocery store. That financially doesn't make sense. That doesn't really happen in our society, but we did it, and it's all God's credit. And if we could trust Him, any situation that looks bad, if you just trust God, He's going to bring you through it, and you're going to be okay. He's going to take care of you.
If we can make it, anybody can make it.
Awesome story. Awesome story. Those are just so inspiring to hear stories like that. And I want to welcome all of the campuses that are joining with us, part of the whole Crossing family of churches in this whole region, just doing our best to share the gospel of Jesus Christ and what it means to live in the kingdom, be part of the kingdom. And we've been in this series of the ABCs of financial freedom. And the A, B, and C stand for attitude, bondage, and choice. Didn't Clayton do a great job last week talking about choice? It was just awesome. Just so thankful for all the guys that are able to just to hit the pavement with the truth of God's Word, because that gets traction in our hearts. And so what are we doing now? We're moving to a time of decision. Now, I know that some of you are going to think, well, he's already done. This was awesome. Because you usually hear me say that at the end of a service. But if we're talking about A, B, C, D stands for decision. And that's where you are, and that's where I am. That's where we all are. This is where this was all driving toward. You know, when you think about the word decision, what do you think about? It's maybe not be exactly what you thought. That word decision in the Greek language is another word that you're actually familiar with. And the reason I bring up the Greek language is that's what the Bible, the New Testament, was originally written in. And do you know what the Greek word is for decision? It's the word in Greek, crisis. It's not even a word that changes from Greek to English. It's the same. You know how you say it in Greek? Crisis. Everybody say a Greek word with me. Ready? Crisis. And what happens when you come to this point of decision in your life is you face a crisis of belief. Now, if you came in here at all of our locations, either in your seat or in your hand, it was handed to you or you picked it up to sit down, you have a pink card. You see that pink card? It looks just like that. Everybody get a hold of that. Got that in your hand? You know what you're holding? You are holding a crisis in your hand. A crisis of belief. Maybe you don't think of it as a crisis. Maybe you're just seeing it as a little pink card, but actually that's what it is. It's a crisis of belief and a crisis of faith. Because you see, that's where tithing takes us. That's where making the Lord, the God of our finances, takes us. It takes us to a crisis of belief, and that crisis of belief is in the area of lordship. Why is this decision a crisis? The decision's a crisis for 3 reasons. Here's number 1. The decision's a crisis because it calls me to do something God-sized. Not man-sized, but God-sized. The second reason that this decision is a crisis is it requires me to exercise my faith. I can't do this on what I know. I have to do this on what I believe to be true. It causes me to exercise my faith. Number 3, the reason the decision is a crisis is because it shows me exactly what I truly believe about God. You know what? I can lie to myself and self-talk my way into all sorts of things. But this moment, this decision actually tells me truly and honestly what I do believe about God. As I look back on this last year, on 2013 and now into 2014, it has definitely been, from the standpoint of our church, our fellowship, our Christian family, it has been a year of God's faithfulness, and it has been a year of God's blessing. And those stories that you've been hearing on video are only just a tiniest little piece of the stories that are out there. You could get on the ABC's Financial Freedom Facebook page, and you could find all kinds more that people have just placed there saying, this is what God did. This is where I experienced God in a profound way. So you've only heard a fraction of the stories, but that's not all the stories. And we had one person that was irate and was saying that the Crossing preaches prosperity gospel and health and wealth gospel. We had one person say, you know, I did it. I mean, I actually started tithing. I committed to the Lord. I committed to be out of debt. And hard times came that I didn't see coming, that were unforeseen, and bills came. And I was waiting for my miracle check to show up, and it sure didn't. And I'm wondering, am I doing something wrong? I mean, it's a completely honest question. Let me ask you a question. Is our decision, this D in the A, B, C, D, is our decision on what we expect God to do? Or is it in response to what God has already done? You see, I think that's what tithing is. Tithing is a response to what He's done in my life, to recognize who He is and what He's done and respond to that. And I know that in my life, I'm committed. I'm committed to His lordship in this area of my life. And if hard times come and difficulties come, that 10% that I relegate to the Lord's use, it won't be the first one that I surrender back to the world. You know what I mean by that? It won't be, oh man, I can't make it on the 90. I need to have His 10 so that I can get it done. No, I'll surrender my 90 before I surrender His 10. It'll be the last 10th I surrender, not the first one. Because I believe when the Lord tells us something, He tells us the truth. I believe that He is exactly who he said he is, and he can do exactly what he says he can do, and he has already proven that by what he has done. 100% of my world is only existing by the grace of God. 100% of my world. I know a story in the Old Testament that really helps me connect to this truth. And some of you may have heard it before. It's the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's in the book of Daniel, chapter 3. And let me just set it up, because this story is being told, and it happens as a result of a nation's unfaithfulness. Israel was a nation that was completely unfaithful to God. I mean, horribly unfaithful to God. And God gave them all sorts of opportunities and tried to lure them and direct them and teach them and even frighten them into moving back into relationship with Him. But they refused. And eventually, God raised His hands like this and said, if this is what you want, this is what it's going to look like. And an opposing nation came in and completely destroyed the country and took the best of their people captive, the ones that they didn't kill. And 3 of those people were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Their names in Hebrew was Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They changed their names. Daniel was another one. And so these men actually were righteous men, but they lived in an unrighteous country, and they got caught up in the wave of God's judgment on that country, and they were taken to a foreign land, the land of Babylon, because of that disobedience and the punishment that came from it because of the nation. We pick up with them in Daniel chapter 3, and before I read it, this is what I want you to see, that these men in this foreign land faced a crisis of belief. And it was a decision that required them to do something God-sized. Remember, a decision, the decision's a crisis because it requires you to do something God-sized. Listen to what theirs was. Starts in verse 4 of Daniel 3. It says, a herald loudly proclaimed, this is what you are commanded to do, O peoples, nations, and men of every language. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Capital punishment, death by fire, if you don't bow down to something other than the God that you believe in. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego believed in the God of Israel. They believed in the God of the Bible. And you know what the very beginning, I'm the Lord your God. I brought you out of the land of Egypt. You shall have no other gods before me. You're not to make unto yourself any graven images. Those are the first 2 commandments. And so to bow down to this image of gold that Nebuchadnezzar set up was to violate the law of God. But to violate the law of that land was going to require their life. So God had placed them in a position where they had to do something God-sized. You know what I think? I think they could have said this. Where was God when our families were killed? And when we were carried off to this foreign land, and it was not because of anything that we did. Where was God then? They could have said, why do I have to be punished for Israel's unfaithfulness? That isn't fair. They could have said, why can't we just be inconspicuous? We don't need to bow down, but maybe we could just go hide somewhere so people don't see that we're not bowing down. Why do we have to do it right in the middle of the crowd so everybody sees the fact that we're not bowing down? God certainly won't mind that. Do you think that these 3 men had plenty of reasons to rationalize a different behavior than placing themselves in the danger of death? The certainty of death? You see, when God calls us to something, to make a decision, it's always God-sized. And that's what tithing is. It's a decision that's God-sized. God didn't make it easy. He didn't say, I want your spare change. He didn't say, I want this particular amount. He said, I want 10%. And 10%'s the same. No matter if you're rich, poor, doesn't matter. Why does He do that? He wants you to do something that you're going to feel. He wants you to do something that's God-sized, that moves you to a different place. Oh, I'm sure that there's lots of justification. There's lots of us that could say, well, you don't know the circumstance of my life, or you don't understand this, or you don't understand that. I wonder if any of your excuses could be better than theirs. But it doesn't change anything, does it? It would be easy for us to justify disobedience to God in our finances. But not these guys. Dead or alive, they were going to make a lasting statement for their God. And that's why God created tithing, because it's God-sized. You know, there's a lot of people that don't see God in the world today. They look at the world and they don't see God. They look at the church and they don't see God. You know, there's a lot of people that don't want to go to church because they see it just as another dumb organization that people fight and fuss and do all kinds of stuff like that, right? Do you know why? Do you know why the world doesn't see God? Because the church isn't attempting things that are only God-sized. And when the church attempts things that are God-sized and God shows himself, then people go, what is going on over there? And that's the truth. Number two, not only was it God-sized, but it required faith. It required faith. You see, a decision becomes a crisis when it requires faith. Look at verses 13 to 18. This is after they refused to bow down. All right, it says, furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace, and then what God will be able to rescue you out of my hand? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, some of my favorite words in the Bible. O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. Look at verse 18. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you've set up. Either way, we are not doing what you tell us to do because we serve our God. That, my friend, is faith. This faith was not based on what they expected God to do or even what they had received in the past. This faith was based on God himself. And I have to ask you, what is your faith based in? What God will do? Is it based in what God has done? Or is it based in God himself? Because a decision becomes a crisis because it requires faith. I'm not going to believe in God just because of my circumstances. I will believe in him in spite of my circumstances. Turning my finances over to the Lord is a declaration of my faith in his lordship. Do you know who I stand with? When I stand in God-sized faith, I stand with Moses at the bank of the Red Sea. That's where I stand. I stand with Joshua facing the walls of Jericho. I stand with Gideon and his 300 men against an army of 60,000. I stand with a young lady named Mary who's having a conversation with an angel about bringing the Savior into the world. I stand with the apostles down in the rostrum of the Sanhedrin saying, judge for yourself whether it's right in God's eyes to obey you rather than him, because we're not going to stop talking about Jesus. That's who I stand with. My question is, who do you stand with? Who do you stand with? See, a decision becomes a crisis when it pushes you to use faith. I walk the path of faith with countless others who have walked the path of faith before me. And I'm inviting you to walk that path of faith with me. So, A decision becomes a crisis when it's God-sized. A decision becomes a crisis when it requires faith. And a decision becomes a crisis because it truly reveals what you believe about your God. In Daniel chapter 3, in verse 19 to 29, it tells us the rest of the story. Some of you may know it. I'll read it for you. It says, "Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leapt to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, 'Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?' They replied, 'Certainly, O king.' He said, 'Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods.' Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, 'Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here.' So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. And the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them, and they saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, 'Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way.' Their decision revealed what they truly believed about God. Let me ask you a question. Would God have been any less faithful in the minds of those 3 men if they had perished in that fire? The answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. Either way, their faithfulness was not going to be moved by their fear. Not only did this reveal what they believed about God, but it moved them to a completely different place in their faith. Can you imagine what it felt like to be Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego after you walked out of that fire? Can you imagine what it felt like? If there was a football, would you spike it? Would you do something to celebrate? Would you do your dance, your end zone dance? What would you have done? And what would you have felt about God in that moment? What would you have felt about God in all the rest of the moments of your life? Because your life was redefined in that moment. That's what happens when you do something that God calls you to that's God-sized. That's what happens when you do something that requires faith in Him. It takes you to a place you've never been before. That's what this decision does. That's what tithing does. It's a crisis, but that's what the crisis will do for you. It'll move you to a place with God where you've never been before. You'll experience Him on a level that you've never experienced before. And that's what we hear over and over. Whether it's through difficulty or whether it's in plenty, God reveals Himself. Watch this video.
We are the Lamberts. My name is Phil. This is my wife, Chrissy. We belong to the 48th Street campus.
Tony and Christine Jeffries, and we go to the Hannibal campus.
I'm Phil Cyphers, and this is my wife, Amy, and we attend the Hannibal campus.
Hi, I'm Teresa Prefontaine, and this is my husband, Dan. We attend the Crossing Macomb.
We definitely needed to get a hold of our finances, and the timing of ABC's was just perfect because we were in debt, and we had a nice house, and it was a big payment, and we were looking to move possibly to Hannibal anyway, and the timing of ABC's just helped us to start focusing on the numbers.
This whole ABC series was an eye-opener. I was laid off from work, and my unemployment was about ready to run out. 4 days before it run out, I got another job, and I think it was all from faith, obedience, and tithing.
The amount that they offered from sale price to sale price was exactly the amount, difference. The amount was the same amount as Amy's student loan.
It was just him orchestrating a series of events that there's no other way to explain it than just by him saying, "You've trusted me with a little, and so I'm gonna show you that it's okay to trust me."
The right people showing up at the right time.
Oh yeah.
I think a lot of times we look at our situations and we think, how can anything good come of this? And God's word tells us, grace and mercy is supposed to follow me all the days of my life. And if it is, what does that look like?
You kind of learn things from each other in small group, and even though we were the leaders and the hosts of the small group, it actually encouraged us more to see younger people than us, or people that were older than us, how they had handled their finances, because that's just not something that people talk about on a regular basis. And with the ABCs of Financial Freedom, we were able to talk about that openly with people that we trusted, and that it was in a safe environment, and I think that was huge.
We, reflect that, and they see that, and then they want that. Well, how can I get that? Well, through trust, faith, and obedience.
He has everything that he could possibly need. It's basically him saying, "Do you trust me?"
And if he was who he said he was, and he is who he says he is, he's going to do what he says he's going to do. And I think that above all else is what got us through.
And my obedience, that I fully trust and have total faith in God and everything, the way that He has been working in our family, the way that He provides for us.
It's refreshing to know that God's providing, that we need to be good stewards of what He's given us, and making decisions that honor Him. He rewards you, and it's just knowing that He's going to provide no matter what the circumstance, no matter what comes up, He's going to provide. And it's just a huge sense of peace knowing that when you make the decision to make Him Lord of everything, that He's going to be there no matter what.
There's a scripture that I want to read for you. It's in Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews 11 is the hall of faith. And it talks about some specific characters of the Old Testament, and then he just starts kind of rapid firing, the author does. And starting in verse 32, he says this. He says, "And what more shall I say? I don't have time to talk about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, to shut the mouths of lions, quench the fury of the flames." You know what that's talking about, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. "Who escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned into strength, who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. Women received back their dead, raised to life again." I need to stop right there. Isn't that awesome? When you hear about what God did for people who had faith, now hold on, because I want to read the second half of that scripture for you. It says, "Others were tortured and refused to be released, so that they might gain a better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging, while still others were chained and put in prison. They were stoned. They were sawn in two. They were put to death by the sword. They went around in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains and caves and in holes of the ground. It's amazing how the writer says all of these things were great that happened and all these things that were terrible happened. But in all of it, whether it was wonderful or terrible, one thing remained the same. Their faith was not shaken. They were doing things that were God-sized. And when they were doing things that were God-sized, God showed them where they were in their faith and in their belief. And that was the truth that was revealed. And He took them to a better place in their life on earth or straight to heaven. Either way, they were safe and secure in the hands of God. You know, I want to conclude, but I want you to think hard. I want you to think hard about if you're ready to do something that's God-sized. You know, a few years ago, my son Joey coaxed the family to go a second time white water rafting. And we had done the big Horn Sheep Canyon, but he said, we got to do the Royal Gorge. We took our vacation in August. I thought I was safe because the water goes down in August and the big rapids become smaller. But you know what? You can't control nature and God in nature. And they had massive flooding. And this was the first day they opened it up again for rafting. And it was highly dangerous. But we were there and we were going to do it. And there's a particular part of the Royal Gorge where they will take your picture if you'll let them. They'll take your picture. And it's a class 3 rapid. Now, I need to tell you, there were 4 hours of rapids, and a lot of them were 4s and 5s. But this one was a 3, okay? So I'm going to show you some pictures of us in a class 3 rapid during this time. Okay, you can see me. I'm on the right in the front. That's Ben on the left. He's the worship leader at Macomb. Behind me is Joey. He's the tech guy at Macomb, and then my daughter, Abby. Behind Ben is Allison. She's the second one back, and Jessie. She's the one that's in the very back. And that's Mac, our guide, in the back. This is just 4 shots of one rapid, okay? That doesn't look so bad. Here's the next one. Where's the front of the boat? Where's Ben? Here's the next one. Oh, that's even worse, isn't it? Where's me? Where's Ben? Look at my face. I am having so much fun. Not. Look at Abby in the back. She's going, I'm going to die. Okay? This is us coming out. Look at the water on the front of the boat. Look at Ben's face. All right? So I want to stop right there. What I want you to see is that's the lifeboat and the water is the circumstances. Just like our life. Just like your life. This is what your life and my life looks like, right? This is what we're trying to navigate. And it's crazy sometimes around us. And we feel like we're going down. We're wondering if we're going to go get back out again. But here's the beauty. Here's the beauty. I want you to see, we're going to close up a little bit on the face of our guide, Mac, in those same 4 pictures. You see him there? See his face? Look at his face. Now look at the next picture. See his face? Look at his face. Wait, see the next picture. See his face? That's pretty, same. How about the next picture? You can't, but he's there. All you see his hat. What did you notice about his face? Somebody tell me. Yeah, he was smiling and it never changed. He was like, okay, I'm going to tell you how insane it would have been and how despicable I would be as a father if I would put my family in one of those boats and it was just our family and no guide on that river. We got to the second rapid, my wife fell out. Second rapid. And that was like 10 minutes in. What kind of a man would I be? What kind of a father would I be? What kind of a husband would I be if I would have put us all in that raft not knowing how to manage that river. Oh, I'd be the Lord of my raft right up until the time we were all dead. Do you know what made that fun, even though it was frightening? Do you know why I still like to look at those pictures and tell stories about that trip? Because we had Mac in the back of the boat. And Mac had it under control. And that's the difference between living your life when you take lordship of it and living your life when you put Christ as Lord of it. Some of you are so scared about this whole idea of finances and tithing and getting your financial house in order with the Lord because it's God's size, it requires faith, and it's going to tell you the truth about what you believe about God. That's what you think, and it's scary. I get that. But let me tell you, trying to manage life without Mac in the boat is insane. And trying to manage your life without Christ at the rudder, guiding, directing, protecting, and telling you what to do and following His lordship is just as insane. Without Him, I don't know how we make it. But with Him, even in the midst of difficulty, storms, even in the midst of hardship, tough reality, I can be at peace because I know that He is directing. We're going to be looking at this card. I want you to get it out right now. I want you to hold it in your hand while we move to a time of decision.